Now is the time, a time you'll look back on, a time you adopt as inspiration. You will recollect this time, this moment, right now. Motivate yourself towards success. Overcome, take over. The time is now.
Good evening, Daz. How are you, mate? You all right?
All good, Richie. All good. And yourself?
I'm absolutely looking forward to the show. It's been in the pipeline for a good few weeks. I've been talking to Adrian, and as we've said this morning, we couldn't have timed this more perfect, really, after the announcement last night. But first of all, I'd like to welcome all the viewers. I know there's been a lot of interest in the show since we announced it on social media yesterday. And obviously with the announcement last night as well, there's been even more interest today on social media. So it's I'm looking forward to it. And what best way to add Adrian to the show now than someone who worked with Dan Ashworth at the FA at the start of the 2012 when he was appointed, than Mr. Adrian Bevington. So I'd just like to welcome to the show. So welcome, Adrian.
Evening, Adrian.
Great to see you. Great to be involved, and welcome to all the viewers who are listening as well.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And I know I reached out to you I think it was about a month ago, and obviously the proviso at the time was, when you agreed to come on the show, was that nothing was set in stone in regards to Dan. You couldn't confirm or deny or anything like that. But it just happens to know that we were talking again the lads last week, saying about. We'll have to speak to Adrian again, because obviously something's going to happen soon. And we had an inkling something was happening. So I reached out again, and sure enough, we fitted it in, and then the announcement came last night.
Time is everything, isn't it? Eh?
It is, yeah. It is. We could have timed it much better. So I was going to say, what we'll do is, I know Pete's going to be joining us. He's having a little bit of technical issues at the minute, so we'll crack on. Obviously, as soon as Pete's able to join us, he'll join us. So as I mentioned at the start there, you were at the FA, Adrian, for just over 17 years in various different roles. Yeah. But the last 5 years, you were Club England managing director. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So 17 years, and then onto the sort of the England management side of things, which was a small group of people. All
right. So what was it like working for the FA for a start?
I'm very proud to have worked for the FA. I'm someone who grew up in the northeast of England myself, a little bit further down, 40 miles south of Newcastle. But very proud to have worked for the FA for such a long time, and also to have worked for the national team, which was something that when I was a little kid playing football in Middlesbrough, beyond my wildest dreams, really. I'd love to have been a footballer, but it wasn't good enough in the end, and it's the next best thing. So fantastic. But with that, a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure at different times, because the FA is responsible for so many things. It's interesting we're talking about Dan here, and everyone thinks about the elite end of it all of the time, but you're also in charge of the development of the game ultimately, where there's so many people in the game all across the country, but you have the overarching responsibility. Then there's all of the competitions, the regulations, growth, participation. There's a lot you're involved in on a day-to-day basis that takes up your time when you are in certain roles in the organisation. So it was quite good to then branch out specifically into the national team structure, which we were in 24 teams, men's, women's, the different development teams and so forth. So, and Dan arriving in, did Dan arrive 2012? I think it was when Dan joined.
September 2012, yeah.
Yeah, and, Dan was a really crucial appointment at that period. So, he's someone that I've got a huge amount of respect for as an individual.
So when was it the FA board, started talking about appointing someone in that role, the elite director role? Because obviously, I know the focus had been away from being on, not doing great in major tournaments, and we're fantastic in group stages, but then we possibly fail to get out of like the quarterfinal last 16 and not kicking on with. Especially when you look like sort of the era you had with, say, Gerrard, Lampard, what was classed as a golden age.
So I think this is where it's really important that the role that Dan, Dan's involvement in the organisation with other key people as well. It wasn't just about the men's senior team; it was the successful development and a plan for all of the teams. If you think about it, prior to Dan coming in, it wasn't. We were qualifying on a frequent basis for all of the development tournaments, the 20s, the 20 World Cup, which we qualified for on a frequent basis and never won again. Generally never scored a goal because we take weakened squads too. We didn't have the pathway set out properly for various reasons, and that isn't a criticism of anyone else. It's just we would qualify for tournaments from the 17s, 19s, 20s, 21s. We often didn't perform well. We were maybe spreading ourselves too thin. Combined with the work that was going on elsewhere with the Premier League, with their elite development plan, where we've seen a lot more better young players coming through in higher numbers over the last decade, which obviously helps the teams perform better on the international stage, but it needed bringing together. I must say, Trevor Brooking deserves a huge amount of credit. It's not often referenced, but Sir Trevor was the selfless individual who was the leading person on a technical role and had done, I think he'd done about 8 to 10 years in the job at that point. He identified Dan primarily. Trevor was the driver for Dan coming in, and he deserves great credit in that. As does the chief exec at the time, a guy called Alex Horn. We had, I think we were going through the different change in chairperson from, I think David Bernstein was the chairman he was the chairman back in 2012, and he was a fabulous chairman, the former chairman of Manchester City at one stage as well. And the board deserve credit for investing into this area. So we had good people coming in like Dan Ashworth, like Gareth Southgate at a similar time. And that nucleus of people, with the addition of 1 or 2 others, that gave the ability for them to build what became the England DNA in a very short period of time, which is, I think, Dan I'm sure will be asked a lot about it when he's unveiled formally with Newcastle. But the DNA ultimately was the plan. What would give the team, the club, an identity, the organisation identity. There was a huge amount of work went on while I was still with the organisation for the next 2 years. But then when I left the organisation, it kind of carried on with that. And a lot of good people became involved. Some went on to other club jobs, as Dan did with Brighton. Some went to Southampton, who also had a tremendous record in the academy development system. And the results came with it. And that progress is still going on now. So that's why, it's important that the investment comes in, but it's not just random investment. It's actually investment with a plan that ties into a broader strategy. And for me, from what I see of Newcastle from not too far away, but from afar on the outside looking in, I think there's a huge amount of work that should give the fans of Newcastle a great deal of confidence moving forward, because you'll move forward with good people with a good plan.
So obviously, when you were recruited the role, Dan was at West Brom at the time as a sporting and technical director. What was it that made him the ideal candidate to take the England DNA for? What was it that the FA board actually saw in Dan in particular?
Well, Dan had a really good reputation within the industry, first and foremost. And it's, even though football is a huge business, it's still quite a small industry in some degrees. And Dan had just had a really good reputation for the work that West Brom had done. Look, they were a team that were regarded as being a very well-run club under Jeremy Peace as the owner and the chairman. But Dan was the football person who was consistent there. They changed various managers at different points. People came and went with success and promotions. Obviously, relegations. People like Tony Mowbray was with Dan. And then he went to Celtic, I think, from West Brom after a period with them. So Dan was the constant thread there. Dan was the person who will have been leading the club's philosophy. He will have been ultimately responsible for recruitment with the owner of the club, with the manager. And I think that's probably what Newcastle have looked at in addition to what he has done with England. Look, with England, everyone can look at, wow, England, results were changed, transformed positively while he was there. And you rightfully, Rich, recognise the fact that the men's senior team, they got to a World Cup semi-final while Dan was in situ, from as far as I can recall. So that's always going to be something that's looked at as a great marker for him. But Dan always had a reputation as someone to keep an eye on, who was doing good work. When he was at West Brom, so he was an obvious candidate. And Trevor was the person, as I say, who more than anybody deserves praise for bringing him into the organisation.
So he was there for 6 years, and as you rightly said, they obviously got to the World Cup semi-final under his time, and they've obviously since got onto the Euro final as well, which is still part of obviously the England DNA going forward, full stop. But how influential would you say Dan was in the whole England DNA process?
Massively. There's a guy called Matt Crocker who is now at Southampton, who's one of the, Matt is, I think, director of football or something of a similar title at Southampton. There was Dan. Dan was the senior person. Gareth Southgate. They had a lot of support from Trevor in the formative stages. But I would say Dan, Gareth, Matt Crocker. There's a guy called Dave Redding who was there as well, who'd been previously with the Olympics and with the RFU, who had a different skill set. A lot of different people who, I won't be able to name them all, contributed massively to that process. And it was a real time of evolution and change. So there's undoubtedly that, the achievements of getting to the final of the Euros in 2020 was undoubtedly a continuation of the building work. But more importantly, you've got to look just underneath that. A lot of the lads who are playing now for the senior men's team got used to winning in the development teams, and that's something that I'm on the record talking about it. Years ago, we had to get into the habit and having the mental strength and capability and understanding, the whole collectiveness of playing for your country, that you could actually win tournaments, and not just the men's team, the women's side as well. And we've seen great strides on the women's side of things too. And again, Dan has been at the heart of that, so again deserves a great deal of praise for that too.
Yeah. I was going to say, Pete, immediately managed to join the stream now. Can you hear us now, Pete?
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Voice though, Pete,
okay, yeah. Then we're all good. I apologise. I was mashing away in the background trying to sort out the sound. So I apologise, Adrian, that I didn't get a chance to speak to you beforehand. But yeah, it's great to have you on. And just in this first 10 or so minutes, it's been a great insight already. So yeah, crack away.
Yeah. So as we touched on there, Adrian, you obviously he left the FA and he took up a role 6 months later with Brighton, where obviously he's been his current role, and he was technical director there. Now, I think everyone from the outside can see how Brighton have progressed in the last 3 years in that time. And, it has been mentioned that he wasn't looking to leave. He was in the middle of his plan that he's got going on at the moment. What did you see from what obviously I know you know Dan personally as well, what that he's implemented with Brighton that was similar to England, but also what was different to what he did with England as well?
Well, look, obviously club football and international football are very different just by the nature of the ebb and flow of competition and the fact that you don't own the players. You only start getting the players in reality from the age of sort of 15, 16 for the first under 16 development group. So whereas at club football, you have them in your system from 8 years old. You have a lot more control of the sort of 24/7 of the players when you're in club football. And I think you have an opportunity to put a sort of a clear stamp without necessarily managing all of the different stakeholders that you're always doing when, a lot of the time that when you're in the FA, you are, whatever capacity you're in, you're talking to your colleagues in clubs to make sure that things try to run as smoothly and effectively as possible. And again, Dan and Gareth did a great job with that. So when he went to Brighton, Brighton's a club that I always hold up personally as a club that I love the way that there's real clarity in the roles and responsibilities there. And I think it's a lesson to most clubs at Brighton, you've got an owner in Tony Bloom who is a passionate football person. He does know his football, by the way, but he's invested massively into the infrastructure of the club, both insofar as facilities and also in bringing different people into key positions. They've then got a chief executive in Paul Barber, who I'm sure many of the people watching will have seen on TV or heard him on the radio at different times, particularly during the COVID lockdown period, where Paul was one of the most eloquent speakers, in my opinion, during that period. Paul's also someone else that he was one of my bosses back in the early 2000s, actually.
So you have to say that.
Sorry?
You have to say that, so Adrian.
Always have to say that, Daz. Yeah. Paul's someone I've got a great deal of respect for. So Paul would be running the club at Brighton, I guess, on the sort of operational and commercial side, working very closely with Tony. But where they're smart, they then bring in Dan as the technical lead. So Dan then is building the technical infrastructure. So to begin with, he's working alongside Chris Hughton. When change is made and Chris leaves, they then look at how that fit, what they want to do with the club's philosophy on the football side of it. And they bring in Graham Potter. So Graham Potter then fits the identity of the way that they want to take the club forward on the pitch with Brighton. They also have key recruitment people in there. So there's Paul Winstanley at Brighton, who will have worked into Dan, but also will have worked across it with Graham and his coaching staff, and also into the chief executive and the owner. They'd recently opened, I think, maybe just before Dan went in, or similar sort of time, they'd opened a brand new training ground where they'd invested heavily in that. So the club was putting all of the different key points in place while also putting really good people in place. But more importantly, absolute clarity over who was responsible for what. And Brighton always struck me as a club that it wasn't about egos being at play. It's a club where people get on with their jobs very effectively, very professionally, and they're very good at it. And Dan obviously is someone who, as the lead technical person there, they've clearly recruited well. What I love about Brighton is you see Graham Potter getting interviewed on a frequent basis, but you very rarely hear him griping about the recruitment at the club or saying what is needed on the recruitment side of the club. They do their work behind the scenes, and it looks like it's a really smooth operational club in the way they go about it. And I'm sure that Newcastle, the owners at Newcastle, that they've assessed who's out there. And if you were putting a shortlist together of potential candidates for Newcastle, there's a lot of people in the industry were doing so just mentally or in discussion. There was probably 2 or 3 names that would be on everyone's list, of which Dan would have been either top or certainly in the top 2 or 3, no doubt about it. It was always going to be a prime candidate for that job at Newcastle. And I guess Dan will also be looking at that Newcastle are going to be investing in the training ground, as we know. I'm sure they'll be investing heavily in the academy, because a club like Newcastle has to be doing that in an area like the North East. Why wouldn't they be? They'll be looking at how they're going to operate loans, because I think the number of players that they will have at Newcastle, because it will be such an attractive club, the way that they structure the loan market will be really important, because financially it can be very important too. And the relationship that he has with the owners, with Amanda, with Eddie, of course, which is going to be a crucial relationship, that has to work naturally. I'm sure Eddie, I don't know Eddie, to be honest. I've met him a few times. I like Eddie. I admire him a lot from afar, and done a brilliant job, obviously, since Christmas. But I just get the feeling that Eddie will have welcomed the appointment of Dan. I can't believe he'd have been anything other than welcoming of it, because they're 2 very, very hard-working people who both got excellent reputations in the industry for their diligence and their approach to things. And for me, they're 2 people who've got a real modern, forward-thinking approach, but they've also got very strong values that could be applied to anyone traditionally in the game.
I think it's quite interesting you mentioned that, Adrian, because as a channel, when Eddie Howe was appointed and his first game was actually at Brighton, we actually all noticed that as he was going to his seat, he made a point to actually acknowledge Dan Ashworth on the way down to the seat, and we actually picked up on that. And previously, in that, the talk had been about people like Emma Narlows coming in as the sport director or technical director or whatever the role was going to be. But I think it was something that we felt that Dan Ashworth was going to be a fantastic fit for the role. I know that me and Peter talked about this in depth, because, as you mentioned, they're both, key details, and they go right down to the nitty gritty. And we did a show on that about Eddie Howe, how he was going to be perfect taking the club forward and stuff like that. So obviously he's going to be coming as a sporting director. How does that role differ from technical director, or is it just a name change? Some people might wonder.
I think we tend to get ourselves tied up in knots in England still about titles in this particular area, and they range between director of football, sporting director, director of football, sporting director, technical director, and branches of that. And it depends on a particular club at a given time how they want to frame it, and it might be someone who is more leaning towards being around the coaching environment, who would be more of a technical director, or someone who is maybe heavily weighted towards the transfer market, who could be a sporting director. But what I see with Dan, but Dan has all the attributes. He's technical because he's a coach. He understands what goes on, a phrase he would use, what goes on the grass. He loves being around the grass in a tracksuit. He's that sort of person. He's a technical person, a tracksuit person. But what he also is as well, where he's been very, very astute over the years, he's made that great step from being the tracksuit also to someone who can work the boardroom as well and understand how the business operation works, which makes him a really valuable asset to the club. So I think the sporting director role there kind of fits the brief for Newcastle as I see it from the outside looking in that they want someone who is going to be a very astute strategic thinker. A lot of what Newcastle and Dan will be doing over the coming years is about strategy. The club obviously have got a huge growth spurt ahead of them. Something that's going to be very exciting for Newcastle fans, obviously, and I think anyone observing the game as a whole. Dan will be one of the core architects of that. And it's not about putting fancy phrases and fancy words, and we can have as many of them as we want. But Dan will be at the heart of the design of this, alongside the board, alongside Amanda. And if the culture's right at the club, which it certainly would appear to be from the outside looking in, they'll work together in harmony, and it won't be that there are loggerheads. Where things fall down are when people, the technical director or the sporting director are seen by the manager or the head coach as a threat. And that's when it falls down. Then what you find out then is you've got, you then have friction publicly about transfer strategies. I just don't believe that you will see that at Newcastle. I really get the feeling that the board with Dan, with Eddie will work harmoniously, but also Dan is, I'm sure, very aware that there's a huge amount of work that's going to go on, not just around the men's first team. It will be developing the long-term structure of the club around the academy development that we just touched on before.
I've got a couple of questions that I'll relate to you later on in the show, but I was wondering, Dad, Pete, have you got anything that you'd like to ask Adrian before we get to the viewers' questions later on?
I'm going to ask one question, and I want to link it to two of the questions that come up in the chat as well. My question is, let's say give Dan, let the Premier League approve it, and let Dan get settled. And if a role came up that would you accept a phone call from Dan and consider joining him in Newcastle, Adrian? And it's not just me that's thinking that there's Banana Man that says get Adrian to Newcastle, very articulate and vast football knowledge. And Simon wants to know, would you be up for the CEO job?
Look, what I would say is I've got a job at the moment, but Newcastle is a club that I'm really delighted from where I'm sitting. I'm a Middlesbrough person. I've worked at Middlesbrough on a couple of cases in my career, but I'm not someone who looks at these things from a sort of traditional rivalry aspect. That Newcastle's a huge club, and the thing that surprised me most is it's taken so long for Newcastle to be propelled into where they're about to be propelled to, because the fans, and it's really glib and cliche to say this, but the fans do deserve it. They are unbelievable Newcastle fans. I love going to St James's Park. It's one of the very few stadiums left in the country where you've got this citadel in the middle of the city that's just hits you as you arrive. it's got a magical hum and buzz about it as you're walking there. I mean, I was at the game. I went to the Leeds game earlier in the season, and then I went to the Norwich game. I think that was around Christmas time. And even though things weren't going brilliant on the pitch, you still get this absolutely amazing feeling as you arrive, and you think you're going to somewhere special. Out, before lockdown came in the first COVID, I was just leaving Middlesbrough, and I went to see Newcastle play Crystal Palace, and I think it was the game where Almiron might have scored his first goal from memory.
Yeah.
Right towards, I was in one of the boxes towards the end of the ground, and I was like, wow, this is a special place. So I'm certainly not going to throw my name in for any particular roles that don't necessarily exist. But what I would say, it's a club that I've got a great deal of time for. I always have, and I hope for everyone involved that success comes, because I think it's brilliant for Newcastle. It's long overdue. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. In a football sense, it's criminal that it's 68, 69 since you won the first cup.
69, yeah.
76 since you were at Wembley in the League Cup final, and it's like, wow, this is like Newcastle United, massive club. So I'm hoping that, and I'm not hoping, I'm certain that success is coming to you guys very soon.
That's definitely good to hear, isn't it?
Come and get me 3, I think, there from Adrian. Yes, if you're watching, Dan, you have his number. Right, sorry, Pete, you probably have a question next.
Yeah, no. I think you don't need to put your hat in the ring, Adrian. I think everyone in the chat's done it for you. So I think it's already a job been done there. But from my perspective, and you may have already discussed this before I came on, but we've talked about the job that Dan has been at, with you working alongside yourself and Brighton. But what's the key feature about him as a person? What makes him as successful and as good as he is? Is there something in particular that he does that he's been able to do working alongside yourself and then at Brighton that really stands him apart from others, at this level? What is that makes him stand out?
Dan is an incredibly hard-working person, first and foremost. Absolutely round-the-clock football person. He is a really studious individual. I think he is a very structured, hard-working guy, but he's also someone who is very well connected and is always working on building his connections. He is someone who I believe is a visionary, and he will always be looking to adopt new processes, new trends, new technology. And I think when we talk about technology, we often get bogged down in tech that isn't necessarily relating to the football side of things directly, but we all know that we've seen an absolute huge growth in the technological area around sports science over the past last 10, 15 years. But Dan is he's a visionary. He's a real modern thinker, but I do think he's got real core traditional football values. And how do you define what a football person is? Well, I'm not sure you can really white label it, but Dan is a football person and hugely respected in the game. And he will just he will elevate where Newcastle United are at the moment to the next level. Fact. I've just picked up on something, by the way, and it's my mistake there. I've seen some of the comments.
I know what it's going to be.
The 2 cup finals in the late 90s. I should remember I was at both of them. I had the job as a press officer at the time of taking both Kenny Dalglish and Ruud Gullit to their press conferences post-match. So it was rather remiss of me to not reflect on that. But anyway,
it's all right. We wish we could have missed Ruud Gullit's time at Newcastle as well, because that was a bit of the one that we don't talk about really. But I don't know if this will come across as a dig at Dan at all, but obviously we respect him and we're over the moon with you. But I know one of the questions that was mentioned, especially in the media, when there was the rumour that obviously he was going to be appointed, was Newcastle fan might be a bit underwhelmed by it. You've got to think that the reason why none of the so-called Big Six have ever appointed him. And I know Manchester United apparently shortlisted him before he left the England role and went to Brighton. But I know I've seen it several times in national media saying there must be something wrong if none of the big six have approached Dan Ashworth. What can you say to that point, and also reassure Newcastle, like we believe, he's the right man for that job?
Okay, first, he is the right man for the job. Right, in my opinion.
We believe you, don't worry about it.
Right. Who knows if he hasn't already been approached for some of these big six jobs that we've talked about previously? We don't know. I'm sure there have been certain conversations at certain points. I genuinely don't know, but I'm sure there will have been when roles have come up. Dan's name will have undoubtedly been in the mix. But look, he was involved. When he was with England, clearly there will have been moments where I guess it probably wasn't the right moment for him to leave because he had such a big project to work on. I guess he was probably hoping that they would win the World Cup in Russia, and that would have been absolutely perfect. But we can't all stage manage everything like we've done with the timing of last night's announcement, today's show. I don't think you should have any concerns as a football club. I just think it as I say, I used the phrase there before, it kind of elevates, it lifts Newcastle into a new territory with the type of person that you've got. He's very well regarded in UEFA and FIFA circles as well. He's got real contacts there, but he's also very well connected globally with, he knows the transfer market really well. I remember Dan telling me stories about, he went down and signed an Argentinian player of his own right back in when he was at West Brom. When that wasn't, it wasn't quite as common then. He was going down there and I can't remember which player it was now, but definitely signed an Argentine player. Went down and sorted that. He's got some really, really strong contacts globally with, leading agents. Very well respected with managers, coaches. He'll know the sporting directors around Europe as well. He's put the hard yards in. He started off at quite a junior position at West Brom. Before that, he'd done other coaching roles. I think it was Cambridge, maybe Peterborough.
Yeah,
he's put the hard yards in to get to where he's got to. He's not just suddenly landed and got this golden job. He's earned this job. I think he's someone that will have been approached at different times, undoubtedly by clubs in the UK and around Europe. But this probably just appeals to at this particular moment, having done a very good job at Brighton. Yeah,
he's definitely done a good job. You mentioned he's got a good eye for players. One player that's really caught our eye over the last couple of seasons is Cucurella. We think he's an absolutely phenomenal fullback. I know we've talked about him several times. I know Martin, who's in the chat tonight, unfortunately couldn't join us. He's a big advocate of. He's a fantastic player, and you never know. He might end up at Newcastle after a left back at some point. Hopefully, Dan can bring him with him or something. I know we wouldn't turn our nose up at him at Newcastle, but. So obviously, when he's had the interview with the board at Newcastle, what sort of plan do you think, like length of plan? Obviously, I know you mentioned earlier on he has a short to medium to long term goal. How do you think he'll want to approach that at Newcastle, and what would his priorities be first and foremost?
I don't know what timeline plan he will put in place, and that's something that. It shouldn't just be Dan's timeline plan. That's got to be something that it's got to be the club's plan. I'm sure that in an ideal world, the club will have aspirations where they, if I was the club, I wouldn't say this publicly, but I'm sure they've got aspirations in their mind of, look, we'd like to win the Premier League by X time, and then we'd like to be in the Champions League by X, and then ultimately the golden ticket is to try and win the Champions League over a period of time. But I think there'll be other key milestones within that. It's like, okay, how many players are they bringing through from the academy? What type of player are they producing? Have there been the type of players that they haven't been able to produce for a long time? As an example, is there now a milestone where they will do that? Can they, will they be taking players from different parts of the country, different parts of the world into the academy system? Will the academy and the training ground be certainly regarded as, like other clubs then deliver them, that it's one of the very best in Europe, and it becomes a flagship. There are clubs that you look to, like when I was at Middlesbrough for a short period, and recently, and when I went there, I took the guys to Leipzig to have a look at Leipzig, because I knew Leipzig had a really interesting culture there, and they were doing things very differently. And you look at that, and there's a lot of stuff going on, not just in Europe. You know, there are clubs doing things very differently, say in America at the moment. Some of the stadium and the facilities and the training grounds there, like Atlanta, places like that. So he's a great student, Dan, and he will pick up fantastic things as he goes along. And I say, I think it's always going to be, it will be a collective if Dan has his way. It won't just be Dan Ashworth's way. It will be the board, the manager, the sporting director, all coming together.
Brilliant. Daz, Pete, any more questions before we start taking questions from the viewers?
Go for it, Pete.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I've switched over. There's a couple of really good questions actually. The viewers have come to, so I think it's a good time to go to them actually, because obviously they've been patient in the chat and putting their questions in.
Yes. Okay. So let's go to some viewer questions. Okay, let's go to this one from Neil. A lot has been mentioned about blueprints and DNA, but does Dan Ashworth have a preferred system or style of play? Will Eddie's tactics be dictated by the director of football or sporting director, or is it the other way around?
I think the way that things have been established already at Newcastle, I would expect that Eddie will set the style of play that he wants the team to play. I would imagine that there will always be conversations, because a good culture that I've mentioned previously will just lead to a natural kind of round table of discussions as things grow and evolve. But Eddie's come in and done a remarkable job. And I don't think Dan would be wanting to come in and try and destabilise that. That would not be it wouldn't be Dan's way of working anyway. And it's certainly not something that I would advocate anybody trying to do. Why would you try and break something that's worked so well over the last 6 months? And you've got two highly intelligent people here, two very, very intelligent, thinking people about football. So the answer to the question, it's a fair question about, does he have a preferred style of play? Well, I actually don't have a hard answer on that. I think Dan will have 2 or 3 preferred styles of play, which is flexible, and it will always be looking at evolving too. And it will always be there to support Eddie in how he sets the team up. And then they will recruit players that fit that style of play, importantly. I think that's the most important thing, that whoever you recruit, where you're spending the big bucks that Newcastle will be spending as we move forward, they're players that always fit the system. As I say, I don't want to get bogged down with the buzzwords, but people are using the word philosophy and identity and DNAs now, and that's ultimately what the exciting thing for Newcastle United Football Club, for me as the outside looking in, is this is a brilliant moment for Eddie and for Dan, with everyone else at the club, to say, right, what is Newcastle United's playing identity? Let's build it now. That's what they'll be talking about as a group. And then they'll recruit to support that as they move forward.
The slight little change, I think, just while we're on that question, is obviously touch wood, it doesn't happen, and we don't want it to happen. But say Eddie Howe left for either another job, or things weren't going as well. I believe Dan's role will then change slightly, as in they will look to appoint a coach to fit what they've already put in place, rather than getting perhaps a manager or a coach in who will then change the philosophy or the plan that's in place. Is that how things would work, Adrian?
It's a very good point, Rich, and it's something that I passionately believe in myself. And so many clubs make this mistake on a continued basis, where you see, you can name so many clubs where they have a manager who obviously plays a certain style of football. Let's just say it's a manager who plays more of a long ball game for an easy cliche. Then they bring someone who will play a really possession-based game, which is the total opposite of what the guy got there. But then that might not work, so then they'll go and they might bring a really experienced set of players in, and then they'll go and try and bring young players in with the next manager. You just don't have any continuity that way. The way that the best clubs work, in the main, not always, because other clubs can always disprove this, but you can bet your bottom dollar that when the time comes that, say, Pep moves on from Manchester City or Klopp moves on from Liverpool, that they will bring in coaches who have a similar type of playing ethos. It might not be absolutely identical, but what you don't want to do is start spending. It's a very expensive business if you've got to rip it all up and go again. And look, that's the reality of what Manchester United have had to do over the past 7 or 8 years. You have an identity for a reason. So you then, the next coach should have similar core attributes to the coach that you've replaced. Otherwise, you as a football club making those appointments, you haven't got a clear vision yourselves for what you want.
Yeah. I think one Newcastle related one to that is, and I know the lads will probably agree with us on this, if you look at go back to the entertainers era with Kevin Keegan, and obviously Kevin left the club and then they brought Kenny Dalglish in. One thing I always, struck me is that philosophy where if you've got a winning Formula One car, you fine tune it, you don't dismantle it. It seemed to be at that point where Kenny Dalglish sort of dismantled it a bit. Obviously, and I think that goes back to what you were mentioning about styles of play and obviously players not fitting to that style of play and stuff like that.
I think as well within that, look, we are going back to 97, 98 sort of time, aren't we? And I don't think a lot of clubs had that kind of continued philosophy at that stage. Although you could argue that, back then and certainly earlier than that, Liverpool from sort of Shankly to Paisley to Fagan into Dalglish, they had a kind of Liverpool way of playing, and then Manchester United were always synonymous with, having the fast wingers and really going for it as a club that, Tommy Docherty played, Matt Busby played, then Sir Alex Ferguson played. So certain clubs have a certain natural identity that can be applied. But I think, Newcastle for me, look, obviously everyone goes back to that great team that Kevin had. And then when Sir Bobby came in, he tried to get them playing in an entertaining way as well. And I'm sure that Newcastle fans are hoping that moving forward, that it will be an entertaining style of football. I'd hazard a guess it will be, because Eddie's got a reputation for playing football and is trying to play football. I don't believe personally that there's one right or wrong way of playing, by the way, because ultimately what Newcastle United fans, like every fan wants, they want your team to win as well. That ultimately is pretty important when it comes to football. But I think you will see a clear Newcastle United type of football just build on what Eddie's already started.
Pete, did you want to ask something on that or something different?
Yeah, it was just on the back of Adrian's previous point, because I was actually going to jump in and mention Manchester United as obviously an example of a team that's probably lost their identity over the last 10 years. For what you said, Adrian, with all the different managers that they've had, different types of managers that played different football, and they've brought players to fit those styles. And what we're seeing now is an example of a mismatched team because of all the different players in which they've signed over the years. The one thing I'll say about Newcastle, and you've touched on it as well, is that we currently have no identity. And we're starting to build that right now with what Eddie Howe's doing at the club. But equally, and I think you've just touched on it a second ago, is that Eddie Howe actually, particularly since he left Bournemouth, is changing his identity slightly. There was a lot of talk about Eddie Howe when he came into the club that he was a front foot football manager, which he is, but didn't know how to defend. Now, if you look at our way of playing, and you look at the way in which we've played in the second half of the season, we've actually got quite a number of clean sheets. We've actually not conceded too many goals, Man City, Tottenham aside. And I think actually this is the perfect time. And feel free to throw your opinions in here, Adrian, with regards to Eddie Howe and Dan Ashworth working together, because I don't believe that we currently see Newcastle United's identity yet, because I think Eddie Howe is still evolving that in terms of what he's learned. We've talked about it on previous shows.
You can't possibly see Eddie's full identity yet for Newcastle. It's such a, let's be honest, he walked into a team that was really, really in trouble from a relegation aspect. And he had to find a way, which is a well-worn phrase in football, but he did have to find a way with the players that he had to get the team out of the relegation. I think he had a marvellous window in January. Really unfortunate that Kieran Trippier then picked up the injury. But the players that came in, made the team Targett was a good signing. You strengthened the defence, so it's no surprise that the defence suddenly got stronger. So that, good signings, and I expect more signings to improve the team. Then there's players that are Newcastle are just going to have to live with this moving forward, that every time a player's available, they're always going to be linked with Newcastle. And it might be that for a short period, it's a bit like when Manchester City first, started under their current ownership, where they were trying to be the new kids on the block, fighting against the more traditional top 6 teams. But gradually, as performances improve, you will be fighting with those clubs for the very, very elite players. That is a fact. So, and with that will be the identity. I think the key for it is that, for me, it's not about just going after marquee names all the time. It's about building players. So look, whether this is a player that comes into Newcastle or not, but when ahead of the January window, I was looking at someone like, obviously you signed Chris Wood from Burnley, but I kept looking at someone like Tarkowski, because I knew he was out of contract in the summer. And Tarkowski, for me, is a really good player in the Premier League in the centre of defence now. It might not be what you want to do now this summer, but in January he would have been another solid sign, the same way that Burn came in and did a very good job for you in that regard. So it's kind of, I think it's just the evolution, and not just signing marquee names for the sake of it. It's improving the team right throughout, but also ensuring that you're bringing players through as well.
I just want to add on to the point that you've made, because obviously you touched on, our January transfer business, and you've alluded to the fact, and I agree with you, that obviously, the signings were in general built for purpose in terms of staying in the Premier League, being that team that avoided relegation. Just a question, to you with regards to that. Dan Ashworth has done a fantastic job at Brighton, and he's brought through young players. He's obviously picked out players from other clubs and he's been able to build them into top players, and players that we know and really appreciate now in the Premier League. The likes of Lamptey, Cucurella, and there's a number of others as well. The likes of Sanchez in goal, he brought through, and he's a fantastic goalkeeper at Brighton. But going into how we move forward, as you've just said, we're going to be looking in time at the biggest and top players in the world, and we are going to be competitive at some point. How do you think? Do you think that's going to be the big challenge for Dan Ashworth in terms of how that works? Because obviously the financial structure in which he was working in at Brighton is very different, or was very different, to what he's going to be working with at Newcastle. And also the expectancy at Brighton is going to be very different potentially.
Yeah. Look, I think it's going
to be a big challenge for him, and his biggest challenge for taking on the role.
I think it's a big challenge for anybody coming into Newcastle now, because the expectation levels are at a different level to anything than ever before. And in the same way that it's different to a level that Eddie Howe's worked at previously, but Eddie seems to have adapted pretty quickly. And I don't have any reservations or doubt that Dan will adapt quickly too. And look, I look at the way that Dan is as a character. I get on very well with Dan. He's not someone I'm on speed dial to all the time, I might add, but he's someone that I've got a great deal of respect, and I've always enjoyed my time working with him and speaking with him when I do. I think you've got Dan Ashworth and Eddie Howe. Have you got two characters there that are wholly dissimilar to Dan Ashworth and Graham Potter? I don't think so. Have you got two characters that are wholly dissimilar to Dan Ashworth and Gareth Southgate? I don't think so. I think you've got pretty even-tempered people who are really hard-working people. They're all got their own individual characteristics, but I think it shows that Dan can work with that type of manager, stroke coach. And I think you've got calm heads there. You've got really smart people, and the club is just going to continue building its knowledge behind the scenes as well. I'm sure of that. And within that, it's okay. Build a structured pathway, hitting the milestone targets that they're setting internally. A lot of what we talked about already. I don't mean that they should never sign a marquee player, by the way, because I think occasionally there will be a marquee player that comes up that you think, wow. I mean, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that they're going to get Lewandowski, but can you imagine if they got Lewandowski as an example? You'd snap your hands off if you could get that player, but you've still got to build the structure of the team. You can't just build a marquee-driven team. Otherwise, we've seen history where that doesn't necessarily work. So, you know, and I think the guys in charge will be smart enough to do that.
Daz, we're into the last 10 minutes that we've got Adrian with us. So do you want to go through some of the more relevant questions perhaps that we've got to start?
Yeah, because I've got 20 starred. There's two here. Alan puts the first one up, but I know there's another one from Mark later on down my star list. But it says, interesting to know Adrian's opinion on a timescale before we will see Dan. So we'll see what Dan will help implement to have a noticeable impact from the outside.
Well, I think you can look at it. There'll be different areas where his impact will be noticeable at different points, and I think it might be that, you know, a transfer window might be wholly attributed to Dan, but I don't think you can attribute the whole transfer window just to one person. I think that's the club transfer window. If the club model is working properly, as I've already explained, which I'm sure is how Dan wants it to work, because Dan's not going to sign a player that Eddie doesn't want, and Eddie might already have identified players with people already in the club, I might add, to bring people forward. So I think it's a collective. It may be on the side where you see suddenly facilities improved significantly, where Dan brings his experience of what he's had at Brighton, what we opened at St George's Park back in 2013, I think it was, or 2012-13, which at the time was extremely cutting edge. You know, so it's a combination of, you know, what is he going to do with the actual the academy. You know, he'll be having a real close look at that as to how effective that is. And I'm not sitting here in any shape or form passing an opinion or a judgment on the academy as it currently is, but Dan will be assessing that very closely. So then there'll be, you know, the quality of the coaching all the way through the club. You know, and again, everyone always fixates at the very top end because that's the most important end. That's what people get attracted to. But he'll be looking at the quality of coaches to develop people all the way through. And he's really big on that. There was a lot of churn at the FA in his first couple of years, where some of the really good, experienced coaches that we had for quite a long time, there was churn, and some new younger coaches came in. So there'll be different areas in which you can assess, or you will see potential change with Dan's arrival, but it won't all necessarily be always visible, and it won't always be purely just Dan's decision. If the club's run correctly, and everything I've seen so far, I think it will be, I think you'll be seeing club decisions.
Okay, thanks, Adrian. I'm going to go for Unify the Toon question. What's the key factors that Ashworth will take into account as crucial in his overhaul of the club structure, i.e. academy, training facilities, player recruitment, club mindset? I imagine all of the above, but
all of them, but I'm sure that Eddie and Dan, with the board, they'll be really working very hard on what is the identity of the club, which is part of the mindset of the club. How do they, you know, I would say between Dan and Gareth Southgate, with one or two others I mentioned previously, they made playing for England a more joyful experience than it was for the time that I was involved. They somehow found a way to alleviate the pressure by their relationship with the players as, you know, individuals. I know they worked really hard on that. A huge amount of work behind the scenes. And that's why it's not a shock that the England players look more together as a bonded group than probably for, well, as long as we can remember. And I'm sure that type of work will go on at Newcastle right through all the age groups, all the way to the senior team, as an example.
Okay.
Good question here from Alex, the Toon review settle. A question for Adrian. Dan has been required at clubs to find maximum efficiency in all areas of his role. Do you think he's been preparing for a role in which he has more freedom to take risks and explore?
Good question. I'm sure that whether he's been preparing for this particular role or not, I'm sure that he is equipped. In the same way that I said earlier, I'm confident that he is the right man I'm sure that he is equipped to do this job, and he is someone who will always be sensible in how he approaches it. But it's like in any industry, in any organisation, different. If you go to a bigger company, you have bigger resources and you can recruit better, more staff, or improve the product that you produce. And I think with the resources that Newcastle now have and the clear objectives that they have, they want to be one of the top teams around. I don't think Dan will be fazed by that. He'll be ready for it.
Cool. Great question here from Neil as well. Do you think Dan will have more sway in getting new transfers over the line with his expertise? Could that be why nothing's happened as of yet?
It's still very early in the window, and not too many transfers have happened really so far. I'm sure that they already have some very clear targets that they are working towards. Will Dan have the capability to help get those players across the line? It will definitely enhance it, but he'll enhance it alongside Eddie and the club. Because for me, if you are, unless you're currently playing at a club that's winning a trophy year after year, right, and you are an up-and-coming player, Newcastle should be a really attractive proposition to you wherever you are in the world now, because you're going to be part of something special moving forward. That is going to happen.
Cool. I think you've answered this, Adrian, already, but I'll just bring it up again because sorry, I miss half the things. I'm reading the questions as they're coming through, so I have to watch the shows back again to pick it all up, to take it all in. But from Banana Man, has Adrian spoke to Dan since he left Brighton on becoming the new director of football at Newcastle? So that's only in the last couple of hours.
Yeah, I haven't spoken to him in the last 24, 36 hours. We did swap a WhatsApp message a few weeks ago where I wished him well if it was to happen, and suggested if he was in the northeast, if he was going to be in the northeast, we might meet up for a coffee at some stage, which hopefully we will at some point, just because it would be good to see him.
Coffee/interview. I like it. Nice plan, Adrian. I'll hand it back to Richie and Pete if they have.
I was going to say, Daz, if you've got one more question, then obviously we can let Adrian go, because obviously we've got him for the hour tonight. So then obviously we can continue our stuff after that.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to carry on watching, by the way.
No, we're under pressure.
The heckles coming out. I'll have the real truth revealed then once I've got off there.
I guess this is what popped up one or two times as well. I guess it's a process that needs to go through, but it's, I guess, why can't Dan Ashworth start immediately? Really, I suppose, or why is this still have to wait for Premier League approval? I suppose for in the weeks and months that we've been waiting for Dan, he was on gardening leave, and officially he wouldn't have been able to do anything. But I suppose now. What's your thoughts on that? Why can't he start immediately?
Oh, I don't know the whole inside track on this. I don't see any problems lying ahead. If there's an agreement being reached by Brighton and Newcastle, depending on what's in that agreement, I think it's really a sign-off process. So I don't expect that to be a long process, personally.
Well, as long as the Premier League don't drag their feet like they did for the 18 months with the takeover, I think we'll be okay
on that one, guys. I'll definitely not get involved in that discussion if that's all right.
To be honest, Adrian, we don't want to get into that discussion either.
That's more important. It's all coming together, guys. It's all.
It is. It certainly is.
Finally.
Well, I think that's a fantastic way to end the show with Adrian as the guest. Personally, I'd love to say thank you very much for coming on and agreeing to come on doing the interview. We really appreciate it. And as I said, I know there was a lot of interest from the fan base on social media as well. And just to bring an insight to how Dan's going to possibly approach the role from your experience working with him. So, as I said, really appreciate you coming on, and it's been a phenomenal night. Could have went on for another hour, I know that, but obviously loads of questions coming in. Obviously, we had you booked for the hour, so as I said, a thank you. I don't know if Daz and Pete want to say thanks as well. Or...
Thanks, Adrian, for coming on, and great that we got the technical issues sorted out before the show as well. So we got you on. So delighted that we were able to get you on. There'll be a lot of unhappy people this evening if it didn't happen. I think, just the level of interest. So
I finally got my timings right as well, so we were okay.
Yeah.
Listen, it's been a real pleasure to speak to the three of you, and obviously I'd like to thank the fans who've asked questions, and hopefully I haven't put them to sleep too early today.
No, we've had well over 400 people watching while you're live, which is a fantastic viewing figure for a live show on a Tuesday night. So we really do appreciate Adrian, and thank you very much once again for coming on the show.
Great stuff. Look, good luck for the season, guys. I'll be watching.
Thank you very much, Adrian. All the best in your future as well, and your non-executive role with Jeff Stelling.
See you soon, Adrian.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Adrian. Bye.
Oh,
well, that was a fantastic interview. I really enjoyed it. I don't know if you guys did. I think everyone in the chat did as well.
I look forward to watching it back later. Taking it all in, Richie. But where are we going next? Because I know we have a draw to do later on.
We do have a bit of a giveaway to give away, which is why we're still on and we haven't ended the show when the guests got off. But Pete, obviously the news broke last night, so I went to go around the houses and ask everyone's their opinion on Dan Ashworth. Obviously, we touched on it a few times over the last few weeks. But what was your response last night when you saw the tweet come out, and straight away, bang, it was in our WhatsApp chat as soon as it was announced, Pete, wasn't it? So obviously I knew you were happy with it, but what's your overall thoughts on it?
Probably more relief than anything, because there was a lot of speculation a couple of months ago that, I think Craig Hope and one or two others put it out in the media that it could be as late as November in being in place. And although there was talk, and we talked about it with Mitch, and there was an idea that maybe a deal could be done in the summer, it's all right talking about it, but actually seeing it in confirmation just kind of gives me a little bit of relief that actually he's in place and he'll be able to take us forward. Now, I think I'm not sure if it was yourself, Rich, or Daz that asked the question to Adrian about, how can he or will he affect the transfer window this summer, and have they waited to do business until he was in place? And for me, I think they have. I think they have. Look, Steve Nixon and Eddie Howe and Jason Tyndall, they've got their targets in place. There's no doubt about that. But I think personally, they want to just roll over those targets with Dan Ashworth and say, this is what we've got. This is who we're looking at. Do you agree with that? Do you know anything different? Are you going to be able to help and support with that negotiation of that particular player? And so I think now, or when he's in place and it's been ratified and it's been confirmed and all the rest of it, I think that's where you're going to see Newcastle United come to life. And it might be over the next 2 weeks. And look, we're going to talk about it. We'll talk about it tomorrow night, of course. But it's just a relief that it's now done. And we have a sporting director in place at the club, which is a big step forward for us.
Daz, what was your thoughts on the announcement last night?
Well, first of all, my first thought when I saw it going across the screen, because I nipped out for an hour and I came back and turned on Sky Sports News, and I hadn't read my WhatsApp messages, and I saw it. There he is now. Finally, he's arrived, and he's signed the contract. There he is. He signed the contract, and he's with us now. And I thought, I'm glad I reminded Richie. Maybe it might be time to talk to Adrian again. And it just worked out nicely that we had it all. That you had it all organised, Richie. And of course, you had contacted Adrian months ago, really to organise. Join us closer to the time of Dan's arrival. But I'm just delighted now it's in place and it's in the summer. And we had, as Pete said, the compensation would have gone down, and it was the right time to bring him in. It also kind of frees up Eddie Howe as well, that to concentrate on his job and let Dan do his job now as well. And Eddie's not double job, and I don't want to burn him out either. Onwards, and the project can really start to begin now. We kind of have our little kind of project manager there to working away in the background, so happy with that.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you. I've got to echo that. You know, it needed to be done sooner rather than later. And you know, there was talk about so much compensation and stuff like that. And I think we knew how big this transfer window was going to be. It's the first big summer window for the consortium, and obviously it's another obstacle to go around a bit. Like, obviously we had different obstacles to get over in January with, you know, inflated prices and stuff like that. Obviously the different setup this time is the fact there's a lot more of the teams that have got prize money for in the shop window as well. So obviously that's something that we've got to navigate this window as well. So getting Dan in now and being able to attack this window with someone with his experience, I think, was essential. And it also speeds up the process of the plan that's going to be in place for, 6 months ahead of schedule as well. So that, I think, it was a great idea to get it sorted out. And, you know, I think someone's just mentioned their life goals compensations reported roughly about 3.6 million. You know, well, you've got to look at that. That could be like a pinch of salt, you know, to the consortium going forward. And you've got to look at how far that could take Newcastle in 6 months. And it's like, as Adrian mentioned about, you know, the short term, the medium term, the long term goals. They want to win such and such by this, and then this by X and whatever. That 6 months in an extra transfer window could speed that up by a year to 18 months or anything like that. So I think it's a great bit of business. As it's been mentioned in the media, it could be one of those where it's the signing of the transfer window for Newcastle. So, Pete, I noticed there was a question came in for you. I don't know if it was either you that started or whether it was Daz that was.
It was just that it was. I think obviously we could put it out to everybody really, but I just thought it was a good question from Life Goals. Would I have preferred? I think he might have meant Emanalo.
Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah. Brilliant. You know what? They're very, very different people. And I think I mentioned it a while back, and I said, whoever we get as our technical sporting director, however you want to title it, will give us an idea of the direction of the club in terms of what we're looking to do moving forward. Now, Emanalo, we've talked about, he was very, very successful at Chelsea, but he had a very different style. So rather than build within his own, he would pluck all the best young players from around Europe and South America, Africa, wherever it was in the world. He would pluck all those best players, use the financial power that Chelsea had to get those players in, and literally, and it sounds horrible, but just hoard them. He would just hoard all those young players, and they would have 30 loans that they would have per season of young players. And it was mostly Vitesse Arnhem in Holland and various other places around Europe that would just loan players to the point where they get to an age where they were either moving to the first team and eventually be sold, or just kind of moved on. And a lot of people have disagreed with that model, but it actually brought out a lot of top young players that maybe didn't make it at Chelsea, but made it elsewhere. And, you know, you can't argue with that. But Dan Ashworth is very different. He likes to build within. He likes to work with the manager. And it's very difficult to do that with Chelsea, because Chelsea have a tend to have a 2-3 year cycle for their management. But he wants to build and grow with a manager. And that is the philosophy of the academy all the way through to the first team. That's bringing players through from the youth academy, not necessarily plucked from other clubs, but brought through, and buying some of the best young players that can go into the first team straight away. So his philosophy is slightly different. Am I who chosen? I don't know. I would have said maybe Emanalo was maybe more high profile because of the job he did at Chelsea at club level, but Dan Ashworth cannot be kind of argued against. And I'm very, very, very happy with our appointment as sporting director, because what he does, it allows us to build from the bottom up. Now, we're a club that loves our homegrown talent. You know how we feel about the likes of Dan Burn, although he didn't make it in Newcastle, but he's from Newcastle. Matty Longstaff when he came through, Sean Longstaff when he came through, Andy Carroll when he came through. You know how we feel about our Geordies coming through the academy. Dan Ashworth is the best placed to bring those young Geordie talents through into the first team. So for that reason, it has to be Dan Ashworth, and I'm really, really happy with that appointment for sure.
Just before we leave you, Pete, on that, there's your first point is your mic is working perfect now. It sounds perfect now again.
It's not. I turned it off. Absolutely,
we can hear you.
It worked when I used it as practice last night, but I turned it off and I've just gone back to normal. So I'll work on it. It worked fine last night, so I'm not sure what's gone wrong, but I will.
Yeah, I know. Audio, it's a nightmare. But also, people wanted to know was that is that your new brandy bottle? The mic, I think they were referring to.
Yeah, I think it was the mic.
You know what? In the build up to tomorrow's show, I might have the brandy bottle just placed here.
To be fair, Pete, when I saw the mic in front of you, at first I thought it was one of those sports bottles with a sports cap on the top, and you must have had your brandy in it because you was expected to be a long one.
If I ever get to that point, someone needs to tell me, because that is next level. That is next level stuff. I only enjoy these bad boys when I'm on the shows with you boys. So, 3 barrels tonight for me for the guy that asked in the chat. Nice to try something a little bit different. When we get the new signing, and I might up it a level. Might bring out the Martell or the Hennessy. Is a bit of a celebration, but yeah, let's see what comes.
Pete, I just wanted to go on, Daz.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly answer the Imanalo and or Dan Ashworth the question. And if we were going into a kind of a market of where we're buying, throwing loads of money at everything, and going down the route of trying to get kind of marquee type signings, or taking the best of the best from. I think then maybe Manalo would be the one to bring in, but I like the idea of this of Ashworth and a project, and as Pete said, going through the youth system as well. It makes it more interesting as well. It's like it'll grow. It's not just a jump in there straight away, and it could end up like an Everton then, like the way it's gone for them. It's just this will be more organic, and it'll be lovely just to see it kind of grow, blossom. That's my thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I was just going to go back to that. I was just going to say the interesting thing for me regards the obviously the sporting director was now it's going to be known as, was we all thought when the takeover was announced that the first person that needed to come in would be the director of football, or that before the coach, because that's the person who dictates the way that you want to play and recruit and stuff like that. And obviously, because we were in such a dire situation when they came in, and we needed to get a manager in, do it the other way around for a change. It would be interesting if the consortium had more time. Would they have still gone for Dan Ashworth, or would they have gone a different route? And obviously, we'll never know that going forward now, but I'd like to think they would have still went with Ashworth, and then they would have still went with Howe. But obviously, I don't know what you think on that, lads.
It's a good question. It's a very good question. It's like if we'd have had the summer, for example, if they'd have taken over this time last year, if they'd have taken over the club right now, would we have gone for Eddie Howe? Would we have gone for Dan Ashworth? Great questions. Would we have even signed Joe Willock?
Yeah,
it's an interesting one. He had a great end to the season, but would we have signed him? Would we be looking at other potential players there? And I would say I think the answer to that may have been slightly different. I genuinely do. And I think when you take over a club mid-season and you need certain things in place, you are having to make decisions based on what's available and what the potential is there. So Eddie Howe was a manager that was readily available because he wasn't attached to a club. You've got technical directors, sporting directors that are available. Luis Campos was a person we talked about, Richie, initially because he wasn't attached to anyone or was coming away from Lille at that particular time. And it was a case of, these were the ones we were talking about first before Dan Ashworth came on the radar. But the one thing I'll say is that would they necessarily have been the better choices? You know, Antonio Conte was the one that we all wanted. We all wanted Antonio Conte. He was there. He was available. Pochettino was the one that we always wanted. Would we have had the season that we have had now with those guys in charge? Would we have gone and absolutely smashed 200 million and just paid whatever we wanted for these guys to prove a point and not had the signings that we had with the likes of Dan Burn and various other players and been in the position we are now to grow and build? I don't think so. I think we're best placed by where we are right now rather than if we'd have been taken over in the summer. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I'm going to skip your question, Richie, because I didn't hear it properly, and I'm going to ask myself a different question. And it was just a theory, and it was something that I heard on Andrew Musgrave's and Gibbo's Black and White podcast. Is what if Eddie Howe was a Mike Ashley appointment? If he came in at that time that he was linked before, I wonder would circumstances have been different for him? As in, would he then have been given a chance? Let's say he was in there when the owners came in, and then they gave him a couple of weeks, and it didn't work out. And I think it would have been. It's just look at the draw as well. I know you make your own look as well, but it would have been. I think it would have been a different story for Eddie Howe. Thoughts?
Yeah. Oh, go on, Pete. You go first, mate.
All I'm going to say is that we would never have had Eddie Howe under Mike Ashley. He wouldn't have worked for Mike Ashley. The only reason we've got Eddie Howe now is because we've got new ownership. That's just my opinion. And
one point, because in the same podcast it came up that I think Eddie was asked that question, and he said that he would have taken the job. I know he had to be diplomatic in his answer, but he would have taken. In theory, put in the situation, he mightn't have. He might have had different thoughts, but he had to give a political answer back to it.
Very, very easy to say now when you're a manager of the richest club in the world to say, yeah, I would have taken the job anyway. But the reality, and we know the reality because we've lived it for 14 years, and certainly in the last 18 months, we lived that last 18 months of Mike Ashley. Now, you know, we could ask ourselves, and we could ask the guys and girls in the chat the question: would you have taken the job under Mike Ashley in that situation? I don't think Eddie Howe would have. And actually, he probably in the summer, when a deal probably could have been done with Eddie Howe, in my opinion, he turned down a better option at that point in Celtic than he did. And he turned that down. So if he's going to turn that down, Celtic are guaranteed European football every year. Eddie Howe's never managed in Europe. You know, he had the opportunity to win countless trophies with Celtic and really kind of rebuild his career. He turned it down. If he's going to turn that down and the opportunity to rebuild a Celtic team that went on to win the league this season, and then go and play Champions League football with them, I don't think he would have taken the Newcastle job. I don't know. Rich, what are your thoughts on that? That's just my opinion. I just don't think he would have, like many other managers, Mikel Arteta, Patrick Vieira, the names are endless that have gone and looked at Newcastle, gone, fantastic club, shite ownership. Not for me. Yeah. I don't know what you think about that.
I think depending on if he, you know, the rumour's right that he said he would have taken the job under Ashley, I think we would have probably seen a similar Eddie Howe to what we saw at Bournemouth. You would literally be seeing someone who has to rely on his coachability, a bit like we saw up until the January transfer window, where you saw the vast improvements of the playing staff you already had at the club. You know, we saw like the resurgence of, you know, people like Shah. You know, we also saw the way that Longstaff had finished the season, and also you see the miracle that happens to be Joe Linton this year as well. So you probably would have seen that more for probably as how Newcastle would have been under Ashley. But then you got the January transfer, you probably would have got a couple of loans in and stuff like that. So I think that's probably what you just probably see on a season-to-season basis. I would like to think you might have had a bit more of an uplift in results that we didn't get wins. We got, like, as we've touched on before, like stuff like the Southampton game at home where we thought we'd scored a winner in stoppage time and then conceded a penalty last minute stoppage time. Games like that, and if he'd had a full pre-season before that, would these things been ironed out, and also the fact that the playing style would have been established in that pre-season going forward. So that's probably what we'd have seen. But I think, obviously, going forward now, it's going to be really, really good.
Life isn't wrong. He's not wrong. but at that point in time where you're in that bar and you're looking around and you're scouting the room, do you always choose that drunken mess? Do you always choose that drunken mess that turns into and blossoms into something? Please, people in the chat, don't put that answer. Don't put an answer in. It's a rhetorical one. I don't want to hear the answers to that.
We'll move on to that one. So,
yeah, Dad, I've got 2 quick points I want to do before we do the giveaway and we round the show up. First one I wanted to just turn around, because obviously we know that Jurgen Klopp won Manager of the Year, right? In hindsight now, after losing the league and also being runner-up of the Champions League, does he still deserve Manager of the Year for winning the League Cup and the FA Cup, for winning them both on penalty shootouts?
No. Simple, no.
Yeah, my thoughts exactly.
We know who is the Manager of the Year.
Yeah, we do. He always will be
on this show.
Yeah.
Jurgen Klopp won 2 cups, scoring no goals and winning both on penalty shootouts. That's what won him Manager of the Year. Now, I'm pretty sure that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I was of the mindset that Manager of the Year was based on your Premier League performance. Am I right in thinking, or is it domestic performances?
I don't know, but this is one of the reasons why the award should never be made until the season's over.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, look, people in the chat, like, please correct us if we're wrong. Like, I'm just thinking. I was pretty sure that getting Manager of the Year was based on your Premier League performance. Now, your Premier League performance, that puts him second in the league. Yes, they had a great total, but they didn't win the league. And yes, they won 2 domestic trophies, but there's been many a manager over the years that's won domestic trophies and not got Manager of the Year. Alex McLeish won it with Birmingham against Arsenal.
I'm sure Tony Pulis did as well, didn't he? At Stoke won. So I just don't understand to this day how Eddie didn't get Manager of the Year. Bear in mind, he's a Premier League record breaker for being the first team to not have won in the first 14 games, be in the bottom 3, and keep them up as easily as he did. Cannot be a fantastic achievement that deserves that award. I think that's right. But to be fair, I think we've all said that, and we've said that for the last month or so. He deserved the award. But the last point before I want to get to the giveaways, and we haven't touched on this on any shows because obviously we haven't had any shows since it was announced. And I think this is going to be an indication of how our pre-season is going to be. But we've got 2 really exciting friendlies lined up in July, end of July. The Friday we play Atalanta. The Saturday we play Atletico Bilbao. What's your lads' thoughts on having back-to-back home friendlies on the Friday and the Saturday, and the calibre of the opposition that have been lined up?
I love it, Richie, because it gives me an option. I might go to Newcastle. That's why I love it. So that's why I'm waiting for the fixture list and see is there 2 games back-to-back as well, the early half of the season, that I'll go, will I go here or will I go there? So I like it, and it's interesting that he played half the team, let's say, in the first game, and it's a different 11 in the second. So I think it's a nice trip for anybody actually that's just not from Newcastle to come up for the weekend and make a nice long weekend of it. So it's a nice little trip. So I'm happy of it from that point of view. And yeah, and it's great that there's 2 home games in Newcastle for fans right before the start of the season.
Pete, what do you make of it?
Yeah, absolutely buzzing. If I'm right in thinking, Sir Bobby used to do the same.
Yeah, he did.
In terms of playing, a couple of really good, potential teams in Europe, back to back, one day after the next, mixed up the teams. Sometimes give two separate 11s out, and it's great. It's a great weekend for Newcastle United fans. The one thing I think would be a quick win for the ownership and for the club is that we do that on a regular, and we name it the Sir Bobby Robson Cup, a little bit like the Emirates Cup. In terms of what the Emirates do, they have the Emirates Cup and they have various different teams every season. The Sir Bobby Robson Cup, you can even start it by inviting some of his previous clubs that he's managed over the years, and then just extend it out to teams. So like you look at the Emirates Cup, they've had the likes of PSG and a number of other teams. They have like one from France, one from somewhere else, somewhere like in Spain or something like that. We could do exactly the same and really build it up and make it a yearly thing. I've always been annoyed about the fact that we don't have enough games over a pre-season at St James's Park. We've got 52,000 fans that will sell out that ground for a friendly. We need to make more use of it. And making it into a cup will make more money on the back of that. In actual fact, if we made it into a cup, you can guarantee TV companies will lap it up, and that will create more money for the club. It's a quick win.
Yeah,
I know Life Goal is having me on here, but I would have spotted that if Newcastle were friendly and going out, and you know what? I go as far as I want to be paraded on the pitch if that happens. Life Goals. That's how I know it's not going to happen. But
Dad's going to get into the sponsors, and we'll get the giveaway before we round up.
Yeah. Let's do that. Let's do the sponsors first, and then I wanted to say what's coming next week. And I think we played a little video piece to get people in the mood for tomorrow's show. First up is shout out to 1881 and blackandwhitearmy.com. I'm gonna remove the banner as usual. And as you know, Bronwyn has a range of clothing, t-shirts, shorts, hoodies, tracksuits, and of course on the Black and White Army side, where you click on the donate button, you find the loaded hat, and it comes in a range of colors, and the profits from this hat go towards the food bank. Also, then a shout out to shybarnes.com. Simon's in the chat. I know he at the start anyway, and
he still is.
He still is. Nice one, Simon. And if you go and check out the website, because there's loads on offer there, even though Richie did put up some new pictures. Thanks, Richie. And shout out to Pins and Prints as well. And the range that Dean has there on the site has loads of different stuff and pins as well as the posters to take a look at. And Retro NUFC, and who I know who shared our show as well. And actually, just on the Retro NUFC, I love the way that they put out these kind of limited edition hats and different things like that. So I'm going to have to get in there to get to nab some of those things when I see them again. So keep an eye out on that. And of course, they have player worn tops and training kit. And Richie's going to talk about more about that in a few minutes. So go check out that Retro NUFC.
Yeah, just while I do the sponsors, remember that Shy Burns, Pins and Prints, and Retro NUFC. If you do decide to buy anything in the checkout, if you put the code Loaded Mag, and you will get 10% off your purchase. And
that code is scrolling around the bottom of the screen. Yeah. So now I'll put that back on again in a second, but I'm just going to remove it because I want to tell people about what's happening tomorrow. I'm not going to tell you. Pete's going to tell you. But before we do that, let's play a little video of what's to come. So it's tomorrow at 8. Yes, we got some special effects. Tell us all about tomorrow, Pete. What's happening?
We're back. I've been eagerly anticipated transfer show. We are back tomorrow night to talk all things transfers, all the links, all the potentials, and hopefully over the summer, all the signings. So it's a big one. We're going to be in, and a little bit of breaking news coming in tonight.
Go United.
Sorry?
Is it Go United?
Yeah, he's saying Galway United.
No. A little bit of breaking news. Lee will be joining us live for the first hour to talk all things French football. He's got a lot to say tomorrow night. So he will be joining us live to talk all things French football, all things French players linked. So look, get your questions in, because he will be joining us for the first hour to talk lots and lots of Newcastle United transfers. But
not put the picture up.
Not just French based. He's very knowledgeable on his Italian football as well. So again, we've had a few Italian links. So looking forward to the transfer show where we are, we're gonna nail things down to the board in terms of where we're going this summer.
Nice one. Looking forward to that. I think that all three of us have gone. Hopefully, Martin and Chris can get to join us as well. So we'll have a full house.
Fully
Make sure
loaded.
you get in the chat as well. Fully loaded.
Yeah.
I suppose that's what it says in the 10. Richie, what will we do next?
I suppose we might as well do the member giveaway. As we mentioned last week, we're having a retro memorabilia, NUFC memorabilia. Join us as a new partner. We've got a member giveaway, and we did say it was going to be a player one item, and sure enough, they agreed, and they've given us the prize. And if you gutted that you're not in the member, well, we did say last week you had to be a member to be part of the draw. So, Daz, we have got the pictures in the chat. It is a Jamal Lascelles training T-shirt. When obviously we had the Puma gear last year and stuff like that. So that will be someone who is a loaded Mag NUFC member will be winning that now. So Daz, do you have the wheel?
I do. It's
wheel.
going to take me 1 second just to bring it up.
We actually this is Pete. This is the real reason why Mark's not on, because he knew what we were giving away.
I was about to say, I hope you don't win. If we win, we'll be doing the draw. If he wins, we'll do the draw all over again. He just said, take my membership away. Because but he doesn't mean it really. Of course he does.
And the winner is Martin.
No,
He's delighted, I'm sure.
No,
okay,
we had that lined up already, Pete.
Because Martin is the only one on the wheel. Okay, let's get the real wheel. Give me a second, I'll get the real wheel.
Oh, brilliant. Let's get the real wheel out.
Talk among yourselves there for a second as I try to figure out where my mouse is. Yes,
I was going to say, surely Martin hasn't cornered the market by getting everyone, by taking everyone's memberships. Surely.
Here it comes. Let me find the right one now this time. See, Richie, this messing that you came up with the prank. Now, I think you can see that one, yeah?
Something's loaded up. There we go. That's better.
Yeah,
that looks right. There's more members there.
There's 81 members in the draw. Here goes the draw. Best of luck, everyone.
I'm trying to do a drum roll, but yeah.
James Coxon, congratulations. You are
Congratulations,
the winner.
James. So, James, if you want to give any of us a DM, and what we'll do is we'll pass all your details on to the lads at me, go on and whatever, or whoever, or the loaded mag.
Loaded Mag's a simple one.
Yeah, just do that one. And what we'll do is we'll go from there. We'll give you the details to NUFC Retro, and then we'll get that sent out to you. So once again, well done.
Actually, there's something else as well we should mention, because coming up on Friday, even though I've wrote Thursday in the screen here, it's Friday on the Toon Review, and make sure you give the Toon Review subscription as well. Pete and Chris are joining Paul, Danielle, Billy, and Alex on the Toon Review. So keep an eye out for that. That's coming up on Friday. So you're getting plenty of action this week on the shows and everything else.
I don't know what they've got in store for us, but it would definitely be interesting. But yeah, if you haven't subscribed to Toon Review, subscribe to Toon Review. If you haven't subscribed to Loaded Mag NUFC, do it tonight. We've already had over 20 new subscribers whilst being on live tonight. So thank you for your subscriptions. We are continuing to make that march to 5K.
Nice one. Where are we going next, Richie? Or are we saying goodnight? What are we doing?
That's it. We're going to be rounding up. Yeah, we've got a big, long show tomorrow night, so I think it's fitting that we we'll cut this one off now and just have a refresh of any transfer rumours before tomorrow night, I suppose.
Definitely. But massive thanks to Adrian again.
Yeah.
Obviously, Richie, you've been in contact with him, so massive respect for sorting that out tonight. Great insight, and as we've always said, this is what Loaded do. We give you the content that you want, and we've been able to give you that again tonight.
Actually, as we close out the show, with all our new signings going to be coming, with our new sporting director, I thought maybe for next season we should give Eddie some superpowers. So it'd be very handy in the press conference. So we say goodnight and play out with Super Eddie Howe.
Why not?
Pete's doing it now. See you tomorrow, guys. Make sure to get in early for 8 o'clock.
Good night.
Take care.